Hello and welcome to this lecture on success with PowerPoint. I think you're going to find this useful. I know you already submitted for me an original 9-slide PowerPoint presentation on a topic of your choice. I'm going to ask you as part of this week's activity to revise those PowerPoints into a more visual, more Zen-like, the style of PowerPoint that is becoming more common in business and industry today. And let me explain what that is before I send you off on that task. If we were talking about good PowerPoint and bad PowerPoint, you can ask pretty much any person, have you ever sat through a bad PowerPoint presentation? And they will say yes. And if you ask them what it is that makes a bad PowerPoint presentation, you'll get common answers. Too much text on the slides, weird animations or sound effects on the slides, poor color choice, font that's hard to read, just boring PowerPoints. And most of you have also sat through good PowerPoints, and if you haven't, you will in the near future, because people are learning how to use PowerPoint effectively. And I'm going to show you a site called slideshare.net at the end of this presentation, and we'll just randomly draw some presentations out of slideshare.net, and you'll see the things that I'm talking about for the next few minutes. So the good news is that PowerPoint can be done effectively. The problem is most people do this with PowerPoint. They use it as a crutch. They let PowerPoint dominate their presentation instead of them as the presenter controlling the presentation. They use PowerPoint like it's a teleprompter. They stand up there and they read the text bullet for bullet, line for line. In that situation, you're not even important in the presentation. PowerPoint's all you need. In fact, just print the slides and let me go home, right? It's a waste of time to use PowerPoint as a crutch. And here's a slide that I hope none of you have ever had to sit through. Right, this is an example of what has been commonly called death by PowerPoint. Right, at its worst, probably about the year 2000, PowerPoint was becoming just a nuisance. There was a time where the government, the Navy, I believe it was, made it illegal, or not illegal, but against the rules for presentations internal within the Navy to use PowerPoint. It was banned from one branch of the military. There was a Wired magazine article that came out about this time, about the year 2000. The title was "PowerPoint is Evil." Right? The phrase "death by PowerPoint" was coined about the year 2000. It's when people started realizing that this is a tool that has to be reined in. There are good ways and there are bad ways to use PowerPoint. Now, is there an answer to this? Is there an answer to death by PowerPoint? Can you do better? The answer, wonderfully, thankfully, is yes. Right? Done properly, PowerPoint is a freeing tool. It allows you to be a better presenter. It makes you look good, not bad, to use PowerPoint in your presentation when you do it well. And one thing to think about as you start revising your PowerPoint presentation is that a presentation is more than an intellectual exercise. You are trying to connect with your audience both intellectually and emotionally. A good presentation, a good storyteller, a good salesperson, anytime you're communicating with somebody, you want to connect with them on both the right and left sides of their brains. You want to connect with them both intellectually and emotionally, and PowerPoint can help you connect intellectually and emotionally with your audience. We are visual people, and the visuals can be a big help. So what I'm talking about is not something that's brand new. There's been over a decade of research on this, and people have made a good living. Seth Godin is one person. He wrote a book, Really Bad PowerPoint, that he sold on Amazon. It was a best-selling ebook in the year, I think, 2001. And he was famous for this notion of, your presentation should have no bullets. Each slide should have only 1 point per slide, and you should use a very few number of words per slide. Here, I'll go back to this slide and say this meets Seth Godin's requirements. No bullets. That does have text, but it's not bulleted text. Text can be strategically placed in a way that is aesthetically pleasing to the slide and the content, and the text is minimalized. It's mainly visual. Okay. So that was Seth Godin, another famous person who's made a lot of money, made a name for himself by traveling and speaking to industry professionals about using PowerPoint effectively for presentation, is Gar Reynolds. He's probably most famous for coining the phrase presentation zen. And the idea, if you just want to simplify it, is that your presentation should be as visual as possible and as simple as possible. So that's what I'm going to ask you to do. Without making you go out and read a whole lot, without getting highly theoretical about this, I want you to revise your presentation, and I want you to push your limit to make your presentation as visual as possible and as simple in terms of the amount of text per slide as possible, and absolutely go beyond your comfort zone as you revise your presentation. Now, certain presentations, that works better than others. Right? There are times where text is necessary and figures and charts are necessary. There is no one size fits all. Every audience is different, every presentation is different, and you are in charge, not rules and not PowerPoint. But for this activity, I want you to be as absolutely visual, zen, simple, minimal text as possible, and just to see what that feels like. And then when you release the pendulum, it'll swing back to your comfort zone, but hopefully it'll end up closer to the zen side than it was before you go through this activity. All right. So hopefully that makes sense. And let me give you some just examples to get your gears thinking mentally about how you can be visualizing and simplifying your presentation. So here's a typical student slide from a PowerPoint presentation about Albert Einstein. I like physics, and Albert Einstein is obviously a great physicist, and with his contributions that he made at the earliest part of the 20th century. So here's a slide. It's got some bullets there: when he was born, a little bit about him, special theory of relativity and general theory of relativity, and won the Nobel Prize. It doesn't state on there that he was part of the Manhattan Project for the atomic bomb during World War II, but he was. I'd probably put that on there as well. Nice little presentation. But if you're giving that, even as I'm talking, you were kind of reading that slide. Your eyes were drawn to the text, and you really weren't listening to me as I was just speaking to you. Your mind was divided between looking at the slide and listening to the speaker, and that's a bad thing. It's a distraction. It's much better to do something like this. Here's a more visual with less text. Everything should be as simple as possible, but not simpler. One of my favorite quotes from Albert Einstein. And I can get through that text quickly, and then you've consumed the slide and you're able to listen to the speaker fully and undivided attention. And at the same time, as you drift back to the slide and you drift back to what you're seeing there, it's complementing what the speaker is saying, not attacking or distracting from it. And as visual as that is, you can be even more. This is where I'm talking about go as far as you can in the visual. So that's good, but here that's even better, right? That's even more visual, and the text is even more striking. And I'll show you in a second how we can do simple text box. That's just a text box with a background. That one's, or we can do something very similar to that. And the little quotes there, you can find some quotes with transparent backgrounds and put those on, and you can make some pretty creative slides very simply in PowerPoint. So that's example one about be visual, keep it simple. Let me give you example number two. So if I was giving a presentation about racism, there's a slide. It's only got one bullet on it, and the text is not filling the slide, but it does have some, it's a little bit wordy there. Racism is the belief that inherent different traits in human racial groups justify discrimination. Right? In modern English language, the term racism is used predominantly as a pejorative epithet. It is applied especially in the practice of advocacy of racial discrimination and blah, 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 blah. Okay, so that's one way I could use a slide. But again, if I'm the presenter, I know what I want to say about racism. I want to connect with you emotionally as well as intellectually, and I want to use PowerPoint as a tool to help me do that. So instead of doing this slide, here's what I'm going to do. I might just do this slide. And now I've got your attention, and you want to hear, what does this speaker have to say to me about racism right now? And that shows the power of using PowerPoint to engage your audience and draw them in by being visual and keeping it simple. Let me give you example number three. Here's a slide. It has very little text. The text is not a bullet. The point being made is financial distribution, and the text there is that 2% of the world owns 50% of the wealth in the world, and it's got a piece of clip art there. That's visual, right? That's better than a bullet listed presentation. But we could be more visual by doing this. Same text, 2% of the world owns 50% of the wealth. But honestly, clip art feels very 1997, right? It feels very, very dated. At a time when high definition, photorealistic, pick our photos were too large, and PowerPoint was, and space was at a premium, and presentations were stored on floppy disks. Clip art served a purpose. But in 2015, really, we don't need to use clip art. Right? Since the cost of storage is so cheap, we can use high quality graphics. And this is just a photo, right, with a piece of text. That's just under the ribbon, going under Insert, and then selecting Text, right? That's all that's being done there. That's inserting a text box, right? And then just type in the text. You can also right-click on this, and you can format the shape if you want it to have a transparency or a background. I'm messing up my presentation to show that now because I can't go into the editing there, but you can right-click on this. You can change the format shape. You can change the background and make it semi-transparent. Down here, again, this is just text. Here the text is a white font with a shadow on it, and behind this we have just a shape. That's just a rectangular shape with probably a 25% transparency. So you can take any image you like and put whatever text you want on top of that image to convey the message you want to present. It's actually pretty easy to be visual and keep it simple with your presentations. Let me just give you one more example here. And I think that that'll get your gears going and get your thinking working all along the lines of what you want you to do for this. I want to think about Bill Gates and Steve Jobs. Both of these were obviously key players in the 1980s with personal computers. Bill Gates with Microsoft and Steve Jobs with Apple as the CEOs of their companies. And through the 80s and through the 90s, they became famous as presenters. One, for being an extremely great presenter that people lined up to hear and were excited. And every time he spoke, it was like rock star status. And the other guy being famous for being an amazingly bad speaker. And no matter how hard he tried at it, he was just never considered a good speaker. And do you know which was which? If you do, if you've heard of them speak before, you know that Steve Jobs was an amazing dynamic speaker. And you can go out and find some YouTubes of Steve Jobs' keynote speeches that he gave in Apple during the 2000s that were just rock star status. And Bill Gates was not great at it. And if we think about those, the problems that separated the two are related in part to how they used PowerPoint, how they use their presentation technology to complement their presentation skills. Bill Gates, look, that's visual. That's not bullets on a slide. So that's better than some presentations I've seen, but it's too busy, too much information, right? I can't tell what the message is. It's trees in a forest and I'm lost in here and it's complicated. And Steve Jobs kept it so visual and so simple. And he used his presentation technology, probably wasn't using PowerPoint because it was a Microsoft product, but presentation technology nonetheless to convey a message, highly visual, keep it simple, right? Bill Gates, that looks more like I look at that and I think it looks like a stomach indigestion slide more than it looks like a technology slide, right? Too much of what's going on there. It's a very confusing message. Steve Jobs, not confusing at all. You know exactly what he's saying there. And the presentation he's giving in the background is so engaging that you're drawn into what he has to say about it. So seriously, if you've got a few minutes, go search a Steve Jobs when he introduced the iPhone. and just listen to him for a few minutes and how much he had the crowd on edge. And the difference between them, Bill Gates, way too much text. There we have the bullets, the dreaded bullets. And Steve Jobs, mostly images. He knows what he's wanting to say and convey. Okay, so that's what I want you to do. I want you to revise your presentation and just focus on being as visual as possible and keeping it as simple as possible. Now, I've got a document there in Blackboard that goes through step by step by step. What about all the text that was on your presentation? What should happen with it? Great question. Pull it down to your speaker notes. Your speaker notes are very useful for you not to use as you speak, but really they should be called speaker preparation notes. Right? Your speaker notes are useful for you as you prepare your speech. They're useful to help you clarify your thoughts. What is this slide wanting to say? What am I trying to say here as I practice my presentation? Because practice, practice, practice is the only way that you really get good with giving your presentation. And if you have your speaker notes, you can use those as a guide when you're practicing, absolutely. Right. And if you really get stuck, depending on your presentation platform, you might have a screen that allows you to see your speaker notes. You can get a quick glance at them and just remember what you're going on and then go along the way. But you should not plan on reading your speaker notes, but you absolutely should use speaker notes as a way to prepare your presentation. So take a lot of the text that was in your slides originally in your first submission, move them down to the speaker notes, revise them, edit them, do some things, and go visual and keep it simple. Here's the closing thought about this. If you're giving a presentation, assume you're giving it to a room of 300 people, and the guy in the back of the room or the gal in the very, very back cannot read something on the slide, then it's a bad slide. Your slides should work for the person in the back of the audience. If you're doing that, then you're using PowerPoint effectively. Now, what I'm talking about is nothing new. These skills, again, are happening around us right now. And business professionals know what good presentation skills are, and they expect to see you using those good presentation skills. One example of this is something called pechakucha, which is kind of like a coffee shop style of presentation. And this was adopted during these coffee shop style presentations because people would tend to go on and on a little bit longer than they should, because we all find ourselves and our lives and our hobbies and our interests more interesting than other people find ourselves, right? Or at least that's the concern that we have. Some people certainly do that way. So they set this up to say you get 20 slides, and each slide is timed to be only 20 seconds long. So you have exactly 6 minutes, 6.6 minutes to give your presentation, right? 6 minutes and 40 seconds. And then your presentation's over because the slides automatically advance. And you can listen to even a boring person for 6 minutes, 6.5 minutes, especially if it's a visual presentation and you're getting new visual feedback every 20 seconds. It's actually kind of cool. And there's a lot of pechakucha presentations out there on the web. They're not great, but the idea is very cool. How do you give a quick presentation, time presentation? Now, I don't want you to do 20 slides, right? I had you originally give me 9 slides of content, maybe an additional slide for an introduction, an additional slide for credits at the end, but 9 slides of content at 20 seconds a slide, that's a 3-minute presentation. And you can listen to anybody for 3 minutes, and it's actually hard to talk for a small amount of time. My favorite Mark Twain quote is, "If I had more time, I'd have written a shorter letter." The idea that it actually takes time and effort to be succinct. And one of the beautiful things about giving a presentation is learning how to be succinct. What is it that I'm really trying to convey here, and conveying that? So this is an excellent practice that I'm having you do, to go back and revise your presentation and trim it down and say, you've got 3 minutes to tell me what's the essence of what you originally presented? What's the essence of it? And then once you know the essence, present that in the most visual and clear way possible. Again, I think this is really going to be a useful process for you, a useful activity for you that's going to help you with real presentations that you will give professionally next week, next month, next year. In addition to pechakucha as an example, that I'm not just making this stuff up, plus the people that have made a fortune writing books and talking about this, slideshare.net is a website that you may not have heard about before, but let me give you a heads up on this. Let me pull up my browser here, and I'm going to go to slideshare.net. And what you'll see on this site is it's a place where people share their PowerPoint presentations. If you have a PowerPoint presentation, the one you create for me, your revised, you can upload it to slideshare.net if you want to, and some people use these. So here, and it's different, right? What you see right now in the video may be different. If you go to SlideShare, it's being updated all the time. Some will be the same, some will be different. And you could just pick one of them and see what's going on. So let's just look at the very, very first one here. I'm going to right-click on this and open it in a new tab. And I can go through the slides. So there's the first slide, there's a second slide, and you can see that this slide, for example, very visual, right? That's very engaging, very creative, very visual. That one, not so much. That's got a lot of text, and that probably doesn't qualify for the person in the back of the room being able to see it. Definitely that one doesn't. That one does. So it's kind of hit and miss. There's no restriction on uploading these slides. Anybody can upload the slides they want to. So here's one about marketing. Marketing people tend to be pretty good in their presentation. So here's a marketing person. And now look at these slides, right? See how this is what professionals are doing in the industry when they present now. Highly visual, no bullet points, minimal text, engaging. So I'm just flipping through this, and I can tell you that this is a person that probably is going to give a good presentation. And even more so, if I'm a business person and I'm looking to hire somebody to represent my company, I would want to hire this person because I suspect that he can represent my company better than somebody who's got a PowerPoint presentation filled with a bunch of bullet points. And on slideshare.net, you can search for things. So let's search for basketball, right? It's the NCAA time, basketball. There we go. Let's just see what kind of presentations we have on basketball. Here's one about Jordan. I like the cover. I like the artistic style on this. Let's just see how this person did. Okay. And number one, trust the game. Right. A quote, right, with black background and white text. Now, the simple way of doing quote, right? You could easily do that quote. Looks just like this, just using insert text on a black background, insert white text on a black background. Yeah, this is engaging. This is what the people who know what they're doing are doing in their presentations. This looks professional. This looks like 2015. This looks like a person that I want to hire. Right? And they're not all like this, right? Some of the slide shares are probably pretty bad. This one I suspect is pretty bad. They're using a standard template. All right, standard background. Yep, this is what I expected to see. All right. This person, if I have to hire one of these two people based on nothing more than the presentation they've given, assume they're about the same, they've got basically the same qualification, they're basically looking for the same salary and everything else, I'm definitely hiring the previous basketball presentation, not this person's basketball presentation. Okay? So, finally, I know I've said finally a couple of times, but I've been transitioning from my original talk to talking about other things. Here's the end of this whole video. You can also see it by a little scroll bar at the end that we're getting near the bottom. One of the things I'm asking you to do this week also is to watch the TED video about filter bubbles. If you've already seen it, then you know what a pretty cool and interesting, actually, yeah, you read the True Enough, and then I have you watch the filter bubble also. Had to make sure that I remember that was this week. It is this week. Hopefully you've already watched that video. If you haven't, you're going to really like the video. And part of what you're going to like about the video, and you may not even realize it as you're doing it, but the presenter is using PowerPoint very effectively. All right, so these are some of the slides from the filter bubble presentation. And just look at how he's visually doing this, right? They're not bullet points, but it's side-by-side comparison. Here he's comparing the streaming of Iron Man versus the streaming of Waiting for Superman. And Waiting for Superman, by the way, if you don't know, that's actually not anything to do with superheroes. That is a documentary on education reform, but he was using parallels with the title Superman and Iron Man there, that the things that we should be worrying about improving education, we don't always make those choices. We choose the cotton candy options. And there's a personal struggle. And right, you can almost hear his talk coming back to you because of the visuals. And he talks about how finding the balance, right? A little bit of the candy and a little bit of the fruits and vegetables and the healthy foods. He talked about the gatekeepers, how during the time when newspapers had editors and decided what news stories were out there, right? That was a day and age, but now we have Google that's creating the filters for what we see when we do our searches, and the responsibility that Google has to be fair and clear about the filters they're putting on there, and for us as consumers to know about the filters that exist. And just the way he used that PowerPoint in the background as part of his talk, it was never a distraction. It was always a compliment to what he was doing. That's just one more example about using PowerPoint effectively. So your task is to revise your 9-slide PowerPoint presentation, make it as visual as possible and as simple as possible, get the text down into the speaker notes, actually practice your presentation. It's only 3 minutes long, right? Practice your presentation, go through it a couple times, maybe even give it to somebody else, right? Share it with a roommate, share it with a friend. Go through this process, because it's going to be so much more than just a few points in this class. It's really going to make a difference on your professional career, because there will be times when you're asked to present, and you may not go 100% totally zen visual in your presentation, but you want to be moving in that direction because the whole industry is moving in that direction. Thank you and have a great day.